So you know that feeling when you've been away for a while, like maybe you took a medical leave from work or you stepped away from a demanding social circle.
Right. Or you just dropped off the map entirely to deal with a major life disruption.
Yeah, exactly. And then finally you come back, you're standing there, maybe it's by the office coffee machine or sitting down at a big family dinner, and there's this heavy, unspoken pressure hanging in the air.
Oh, absolutely. You can feel it.
You really can. People are looking at you, and you can practically hear the questions screaming in their minds. And they don't just want to know how you are, right? They're waiting for a very specific, neat, tidy explanation for your absence.
Well, they want a narrative, essentially.
Yeah.
A highly structured, predictable storyline that packages up where you went, what you learned, and most importantly, assures them that everything is completely back to normal now.
Yes. And that is exactly what we are doing in today's deep dive. Our mission today is to figure out exactly what is happening in that terrifying coffee machine moment.
It really is terrifying when you stop to think about it.
It's the worst. So we're unpacking a Substack post today. It's titled, Reading Between Worlds, Return or Not. And, it's a very brief excerpt, but it is this incredibly dense philosophical look at what actually happens when we step back from our lives.
And, of course, the immense, almost invisible societal pressures that sort of hunt us down when we try to return.
Right. So we are going to look at the mechanics of concepts like healing and resilience, because usually we view those as purely personal triumphs, right?
We do, yeah. But this discussion is going to challenge you to look at them as societal demands instead. It fundamentally questions what bouncing back really means and who that bounce actually benefits.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we need to start right at the end of that hypothetical break we just talked about.
The return phase.
Exactly. When someone steps away from the machinery of daily life, there's this universal human expectation that kicks in. The text points out a very plain observation. After the break, everyone wants a story.
But not just any story, right?
No. They don't want the messy, complicated, nonlinear truth. The author notes that people are looking for a reassuring story with a gentle arc.
The gentle arc. It's so specific.
It is. There's an exact progression we are all expected to perform. It goes exactly like this. First, a temporary difficulty. Second, a meaningful pause.
All right.
Third, a period of reflection. Fourth, a season of healing. And finally, a courageous return.
Yeah, that sequence is essentially the prescribed choreography of a crisis. I mean, we absorb it from movies, from literature, from corporate HR policies.
Oh, definitely HR policies.
It's so deeply ingrained in our collective psyche that we almost never stop to question why we require people to follow it. The author says they love a return, not because they miss you, always. Sometimes they do. But it's about that story.
I have to push back here, though, just a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Because let's look at that sequence again. A difficulty, a pause, healing, and a courageous return. Isn't that just a testament to human resilience? I mean, this is basically the traditional Hollywood hero's journey.
It is, yeah.
So if I suffer severe burnout, step away, do the hard work of going to therapy, and finally overcome that darkness, I want to celebrate that. I want to be the hero returning from the cave.
That's a very natural way to feel.
So why are we framing a successful, courageous return from a personal crisis as some sort of sinister societal manipulation? I mean, is it really about the person returning, or is it about making everyone else comfortable?
What's fascinating here is that is the exact tension we need to explore. Look, celebrating personal growth is wonderful, but we have to ask why society only rewards that growth when it culminates in a return to the starting line.
Oh, wow. The starting line.
Right. Think about the psychology of a group, whether it's, a family unit or a corporate office. When you burn out or when a system breaks you down so thoroughly that you physically or mentally have to exit,
your absence is loud.
It is a glaring, terrifying indictment of that environment. If you broke down doing this job, the person sitting at the desk next to you suddenly has to wonder, am I next?
Right, because if it happened to you, it could happen to them.
Exactly. Your empty chair suggests that the way we work or the way we relate to each other is fundamentally flawed and unsustainable.
So my breakdown is essentially a contagious threat to the group.
Yes.
It's inconvenient evidence that the machine we are all happily pretending is safe is actually broken.
Precisely. And human beings are terrified of structural change. I mean, structural change requires massive effort, it risks livelihoods, it disrupts hierarchies.
It's a lot of work.
So instead of interrogating the system, society shifts the burden entirely onto the individual who broke. By demanding a gentle arc, A story where the systemic failure is localized and framed merely as your own temporary difficulty, society neutralizes the threat you pose.
That makes a lot of sense. So if the narrative is that I just needed a meaningful pause, then the company doesn't have to admit their workload is abusive. And
Exactly.
if I just needed a season of healing, then the family doesn't have to admit their communication style is toxic. The problem is safely contained within me.
The rigid narrative arc forces you to internalize the structural failure. It protects the status quo. There is a devastating caveat in this text about why people love a return.
Yeah, that part was brutal.
They love a return, not always because they miss you. Sometimes they do, sure. But primarily, your return validates their choice to stay.
Oh, man. That is heavy.
It really is. Your presence back in that ecosystem signals to everyone else that the environment is survivable. They miss the function you provided, and they miss the psychological reassurance your physical body gives them that the system doesn't need to be dismantled.
If you think about the psychological weight of that, it means every time we welcome someone back with a, oh, we're so glad you're better banner in the break room.
Fake in the balloons.
Yeah. We might actually be demanding they validate our own life choices. We force people into this neat little box of a narrative so we don't have to look at the precarious ledge we are all standing on.
Which brings us to the reality of the finish line. Because if society is demanding this courageous return to soothe its own anxieties, what does that return actually look like for the person who went away and did all that profound internal healing?
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where the illusion completely shatters.
It totally shatters.
When you actually look at the environment you're returning to, the source text says the architecture remains completely untouched.
Untouched.
You cross that finish line, you step back into the building, and the physical and structural reality of the place hasn't changed one single bit.
The geometry of the space is the same. The power dynamics are exactly the same. The unrealistic expectations are right where you left them.
There is this concept in the text of softer branding that perfectly captures this. The author says that sometimes what gets labeled as healing or reintegration is just the old geometry with better lighting.
Such a great phrase.
It's renewed access to your labor under slightly softer branding. Let's look at the mechanics of corporate wellness programs, because they are the ultimate real-world application of this.
Oh, they absolutely are.
Say you burn out because you are doing the jobs of 3 people with absolutely zero support. You literally cannot function anymore. You take a 6-week medical leave.
A classic temporary difficulty, according to the ARC.
Right. And while you are gone, does the company hire 2 more people to distribute the workload? Do they fire the abusive middle manager?
Of course not.
No. They do the math. Hiring 2 people costs $150,000 a year. Instead, HR gives you a premium subscription to a meditation app.
Yeah, or they institute Yoga Fridays.
Exactly. They start calling sick days mental health days. They put a beanbag chair in the break room. That is the softer branding. That is the better lighting.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is the aesthetics of care layered over the mechanics of exploitation.
Oh, that's perfectly said. Because when you sit back down at your desk on Monday morning, your workload is identical. The deadlines are still impossible.
Nothing has actually changed.
The structural source of your stress, that untouched architecture the text talks about, it's waiting for you. You are being shoved back into the exact same high-stress cubicle, but now you have an app that tells you to breathe deeply while you drown.
Let's dive deeper into the vernacular of this process. Think about the phrase resilience training.
Oh yeah, that's massive in the corporate world right now.
It's everywhere. But if an environment requires its inhabitants to undergo specialized training just to withstand it, that environment is inherently hostile.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
But by focusing on the individual's resilience, the system absolves itself. If you break again, well, it's not because the workload is crushing, it's because you didn't utilize your meditation app effectively. You failed to be resilient.
That reframing is incredibly cold.
It's freezing.
It takes something deeply personal, like human healing, and co-opts it entirely for productivity. Because healing is supposed to be a holistic restoration of a person, It's supposed to be spiritual, emotional, physical.
Right.
But in the context of this old geometry, healing is redefined as mere functionality.
The transactional nature of this dynamic is laid bare in the phrase renewed access to your labor. I mean, that phrase strips away all the sentimental HR-approved language we usually wrap around recovery.
It's so blunt.
It is. You aren't a human being who has achieved wholeness. You are a piece of machinery that was taken offline for maintenance and is now cleared to resume output.
Like putting a brand new transmission in a car just so you can immediately drive it back into the same brick wall.
That's exactly it. The
Yeah.
system doesn't actually want you deeply spiritually healed because true, profound healing expands a person. It clarifies boundaries.
Right. True healing might make you realize you deserve fundamentally better than the current architecture can offer.
Exactly. The system just wants you functional enough to be put back to work. It wants the friction of your breakdown smoothed over with that softer branding so that the extraction of your labor can resume without guilt or interruption.
Because reintegration isn't really about making you whole,
Not at all. It's about sanding off your rough edges so you fit back into the machine.
which sets up a terrible, almost tragic collision. Because let's say you actually did the work during your meaningful pause.
Yep.
You changed. You grew. You are a completely different shape now.
Yeah, you evolved.
But the hole you were expected to slide back into, the untouched architecture, is the exact same shape it was when it broke you. You are being asked to pretend that a beanbag chair solves structural exhaustion.
You are being asked to shrink yourself back down to fit the geometry of your own exploitation. And if reintegration is just a trap, if it's just the old geometry masquerading as a new beginning, well, we have to ask what the alternative is.
And the alternative presented in the text is an incredibly defiant option.
It's radical, honestly.
It really is. It's the realization that not every rupture is asking to become a bridge.
We really need to linger on that metaphor of the rupture, because a rupture is a violent severing. It's a tear in the fabric of your life.
Yeah.
And because we are so deeply conditioned by the gentle arc narrative we talked about earlier, our immediate, almost Pavlovian instinct when we see a rupture is to repair it.
We just want to fix it.
Right. We feel this overwhelming compulsion to build a bridge over the gap so we can cross back over to where we used to be.
But I want to really challenge this idea, though, because we are taught our entire lives that quitting is a moral failure. Giving up is messy.
Sure.
Refusing to participate is viewed as highly emotional, irrational, or just, a temper tantrum. Yet the concept we are exploring suggests that sometimes the most coherent act is not returning at all, but refusal.
Yes.
How can walking away, leaving a relationship, abandoning a career path, leaving a community, how can that be considered the most coherent choice?
This raises an important question about identity and what coherence actually means in this context. Because coherence isn't about making other people comfortable.
Right.
In physics, coherence is about waves aligning perfectly. In logic, it's about parts of a system making sense together. So in a human life, coherence is internal consistency. It is the alignment between your core values, your physical reality, and your actions.
Okay, let's use a literal rupture as an analogy. An earthquake.
Perfect.
Imagine a massive seismic event hits and the ground physically splits wide open. There is now a gaping 100-foot chasm between your house and the road you used to take to work. The landscape has fundamentally, violently altered.
The architecture is no longer untouched.
Right. Now imagine trying to build a flimsy makeshift rope bridge over that unstable, massive gap just so you can force your way back to your old commute.
It's crazy.
It's dangerous. It is profoundly irrational. Accepting that the geography of your life has permanently changed and that the gap is impassable, saying, I can no longer travel this path, that is actually the logical, coherent choice. Building the bridge is the emotional, desperate act.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the cost of reentry. The author explicitly says that the most coherent act is refusal, especially when the cost of reentry is your own recognizability. That is the ultimate stakes of this entire discussion.
Your own recognizability, meaning whether you can look in the mirror and actually recognize the person staring back at you.
Exactly. If the old geometry of a workplace or a marriage or a social circle requires you to constantly contort yourself to fit into
People all the time.
If you have to disguise your newly discovered boundaries, swallow your true feelings, and pretend that the company's mental health day actually addresses their toxic culture, then you are actively shedding your identity. You are amputating parts of yourself to fit into that untouched architecture.
You are playing a fictional character in someone else's reassuring story.
That's exactly what it is.
I just imagine someone who steps away from like a brutal 80-hour-a-week corporate law job. And during their leave, they realize they actually love a quiet life. They love baking. They love spending time with their kids. They become a softer, more present person.
They've healed.
Yeah. But the leave ends. And to go back to that firm, to cross the bridge, they have to put the ruthless, exhausted lawyer mask back on. They have to hide the baker. They have to hide the parent. They literally become unrecognizable to themselves just to maintain the comforting narrative for the partners at the firm.
And that is the definition of incoherence. Your internal reality no longer matches your external actions. If returning to the untouched architecture costs you your very identity, then returning is a betrayal of reality. Therefore, refusing to return, refusing to build a bridge over a necessary boundary is the ultimate act of self-preservation. It is the only way to retain your clarity. You are looking at the rupture and saying, this gap exists for a reason. The ground split because the pressure was untenable. I will not destroy myself trying to pretend the earthquake didn't happen.
Man, that completely removes the shame from walking away. It reclassifies quitting not as a failure of endurance, but as a triumph of self-awareness.
It really does.
It means that, for you listening right now, your pauses, your breaks, and your ruptures belong entirely to you. They are your data points. They do not belong to the audience waiting back at the office or the family members waiting at the dinner table for your courageous return.
No, they don't.
You do not owe anyone a gentle arc, and you certainly do not owe a broken system renewed access to your labor. So we've moved from exposing society's selfish demand for a reassuring story to uncovering how healing is often just softer branding. And finally, to this really empowering realization that leaving a rupture as a rupture is a completely valid choice.
It is. And I'd love to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on what we've discussed today. If you are currently standing on the edge of a rupture in your own life right now, whether you're on a leave of absence from a job, taking a break from a long-term relationship, or simply pausing a lifelong pursuit that has been grinding you down, consider the landscape.
Just look at it.
Yeah. What would happen if you simply stopped gathering wood to build a bridge? What if, instead of agonizing over how to contort yourself to squeeze back into the old geometry, you turned around and walked in a new direction, letting the rupture remain exactly what it is, a permanent, necessary boundary?